A fallen cowhand receives a crippled maiden as a cruel matrimonial offering meant to mock what others see as a union of two broken souls. When merciless bandits stumble upon this unexpected duo, will they learn too late that they've misjudged the deadliest alliance the frontier has ever witnessed? Crimson droplets fell from Ezra's bruised knuckles onto the tavern's wooden planks as hostile hollers pierced the hazy atmosphere. The hulking figure he'd struck was rising again, while 3 more ranch hands reached for their iron. Ezra Hawthorne had always excelled at brawling, but this day felt peculiar. This day felt like the culmination of everything he'd built in the Nebraska Territory during the sweltering summer of 1867. The other cowhands at Murphy's Tavern were distancing themselves, as if he carried some dreaded plague. "You gutless worm!" bellowed Pete Wilson, dabbing at his shattered nose, fleeing from them Apache like a frightened jackrabbit. "Jimmy perished because of your cowardice." Those words stung worse than any physical blow. 3 months prior, Ezra had been counted among Clearwater's finest cowboys. He could lasso cattle quicker than most men could draw breath. His mount had unwavering faith in him. Ranchers would pay premium wages for his expertise during cattle drives. But everything transformed after the Apache raid that May. Ezra's fingers trembled as he recalled that fateful day. He and Jimmy had been inspecting fence lines when the war party crested the hill. 15 painted braves on swift ponies, hollering and loosing arrows. Jimmy had shouldered his rifle and returned fire. But Ezra had glimpsed those fierce expressions and felt his valor evaporate like morning dew. He'd fled abandoned his closest friend to battle alone while he cowered behind a boulder like a thunder-spooked child. Jimmy fell with 3 shafts in his chest. The Apache claimed his horse and weapon. They abandoned his corpse for the scavengers beneath the merciless prairie sky. Now the entire territory understood Ezra's true nature. "Clear out, Hawthorne," Murphy the tavern keeper said wearily. His tone wasn't cruel, just exhausted. "These fellows have cause for their anger. You've stirred up enough trouble today." Ezra retrieved his dirt-covered hat from the floor. Not a soul acknowledged him as he approached the exit. These men had once been his companions. They'd shared evening fires and tales. They'd supported each other through hardships and perilous tasks. But camaraderie couldn't endure what he'd done. Outside, the Nebraska sun hammered Main Street like a blacksmith's tool on hot metal. Clearwater was barely a settlement. Just a single dirt road with scattered wooden structures on either side. The general store, the smithy, the church, and Murphy's Tavern. Most residents dwelled on ranches dispersed across the boundless prairie. Ezra's modest cabin perched 5 miles east of Clearwater, isolated on a small plot he'd purchased with his life savings. The dwelling was sparse, just 2 rooms and a weathered porch. Once it had embodied his aspirations, a sanctuary where he could forge something permanent. Now the cabin felt more like a confining cell. His faithful mount, Dusty, stood quietly at the hitching post. The brown mare remained one of the few creatures that offered no condemnation. She pressed her muzzle against his shoulder as he settled into the saddle. "Let's head back, girl," he murmured. The journey stretched an hour through undulating hills, blanketed with prairie grass that swayed like sea swells in the breeze. Prairie dogs emerged from their burrows, observing his passage. A crimson-tailed hawk drifted in lazy circles above, scanning for prey. This landscape could stir the soul when hope lived in a man's heart. Today, it merely seemed desolate. Reaching his cabin, Ezra removed Dusty's tack and guided her to drink from the crude trough he'd constructed during the previous winter. His humble dwelling appeared shabby beside the grand ranch houses where he'd once earned his keep. The roof sagged. The porch steps creaked dangerously. Weeds invaded the foundation's edge. He lowered himself onto those unstable steps, gazing across the endless grassland. No structures broke the horizon in any direction. No smoke spiraled from distant chimneys. Only the whisper of wind insect songs and his own shallow breaths disturbed the silence. This solitary existence was his penance now. As twilight approached, he spotted 3 horsemen emerging from the distant prairie. Even at range, their identities were unmistakable. Buck Morrison led astride his ebony stallion, with Jake Patterson and Tom Wheeler trailing like obedient hounds. Buck had once called Ezra friend before the Apache attack changed everything. They'd worked cattle in tandem and shared laughter around evening fires. But Buck harbored a darkness that found pleasure in others' misfortunes. Evening. Ezra. Buck's greeting carried false warmth like a rattler mimicking a meadowlark. "Mind if we water our mounts?" Ezra gestured toward the trough. Words felt dangerous in his throat. These men hadn't ridden 5 miles for water. Buck dismounted while his companions remained a horse. Each man wore iron at his hip and carried the hardened demeanor of cowboys who'd witnessed too much violence. "Been hearing talk in town," Buck announced, removing his hat to fan his face. "About your circumstances out here." "What circumstances?" "Living in isolation like this. No woman, no kin, no future." Buck's grin revealed predatory intent. "Boys at Murphy's been discussing things. Figure you could use some assistance." Despite the evening heat, ice seemed to form in Ezra's gut. "I don't require assistance from anyone." "That's where you're mistaken, old friend." Buck repositioned his hat and surveyed his companions. "Word reached us about a family in distress. They've got a daughter requiring care, quite desperately." Jake shifted in his saddle, leaning forward. "A young lady named Isabel Crane, beautiful as a spring morning from what we hear. Or was before her misfortune." "What misfortune?" Ezra inquired, though uncertainty tinged his voice. "Carriage accident 2 years past," Tom explained. "Damaged her spine. Can't use her legs anymore. She's become quite a challenge for her family since then." Buck nodded with feigned sympathy, though malice glinted in his eyes. "Her uncle's searching frantically for a suitable husband. They're offering compensation. $50 and her father's golden timepiece." The trio observed Ezra's response like predators studying wounded prey. He recognized the cruel jest forming in their thoughts. The coward and the invalid. 2 damaged souls nobody desired. "Why share this with me?" he questioned. "Because we're looking out for you," Buck replied. "That's what friends do. The Cranes need someone to tend their daughter. And you, well, you're lacking in most departments." "Seems fitting, doesn't it?" Jake chuckled. "Besides, your choices are limited. No respectable woman would wed a man known for fleeing conflict." The statement cut deep with its truth. Ezra's standing was irreparably damaged. No family throughout the territory would consider him for their daughters. He was tainted much like the girl they described. Yet something felt amiss about the situation. What brought these men here truly? What benefit did they seek from this arrangement? "What's your stake in this?" he challenged. Buck's artificial smile wavered momentarily. "Let's say the Cranes show appreciation to those helping resolve their situation. Appreciation in the form of a finder's payment." The truth emerged. They'd profit from matching an unwanted woman with an unwanted man. 2 dilemmas resolved through one heartless solution. "I need to consider this," Ezra stated. "Take your time." Buck mounted his horse. "But don't deliberate too long. The family grows desperate. They might start considering other eligible men if you delay your decision." As the trio vanished into the deepening dusk, Ezra remained on his porch, contemplating whether this represented his lowest point or if further descent awaited. The wagon appeared at first light, its wheels protesting beneath a driver whose expression suggested profound displeasure with his task. Ezra had spent the night's hours pacing his cabin's confines, wrestling with the decision. Part of him yearned to reject Buck's proposition and return the young woman to her family. But another part of him, the solitary voice that spoke during those dark pre-dawn hours, suggested this might be his sole opportunity to find companionship in life. Now as he watched the weathered wagon approach his porch, he felt the weight of a man poised at a precipice. The driver appeared gaunt, his graying whiskers and worn attire telling tales of hard times. The man descended with evident discomfort, his movements suggesting years of physical strain, and made his way to where Ezra maintained his vigil. "You'd be Hawthorne?" the man inquired. "That's correct. Henry Crane's the name. Isabel's uncle." He made no gesture of greeting. "Brought your intended along with her belongings." His tone when saying intended was as impersonal as if he were delivering common merchandise. Henry proceeded to the wagon's rear, working to loosen the ropes securing a canvas covering. "Quiet sort, mostly," Henry commented without meeting Ezra's gaze. "Good with a needle and thread, educated, too. Just needs assistance with mobility, if you understand my meaning." Ezra's throat constricted with anxiety. "Perhaps I should introduce myself first." "She's conscious. Been that way since before daybreak, truth be told." Henry drew back the canvas, revealing the wagon's interior, which had been outfitted with blankets and a modest mattress. The sight of the woman within defied Ezra's expectations. While townspeople had described her as attractive, that description fell short of reality. Isabel Crane possessed hair reminiscent of autumn's finest colors and complexion, like morning's first light. Her eyes, vibrant as spring meadows, carried a melancholy that tugged at Ezra's heart. Despite her evident apprehension, she maintained a brave facade. "You must be Ezra," she spoke. Her voice carried gentle strength. "Yes, ma'am. Isabel." Ezra acknowledged with a tip of his hat. "I'm pleased to make your acquaintance." The words weren't entirely truthful. This situation brought him no joy, but his upbringing demanded courtesy, and this woman deserved better than brutal honesty about their circumstances. Isabel's gaze searched his features intently. "They explained my situation." "Yes, ma'am. And you're certain about proceeding?" Ezra glanced toward Henry, who busied himself unloading Isabel's possessions from the wagon. The elderly man's haste to conclude his task was apparent. "I believe so," Ezra responded. Isabel's lips curved slightly. Though not joyful, her smile lacked bitterness. Instead, it reflected weariness, as if life had taught her to expect little from others. "Very well," she said. It was time to begin. Moving Isabel from the wagon to the cabin proved more challenging than Ezra had anticipated. Her legs were completely immobile, and she carried more weight than her frame suggested. Though Henry offered assistance, his advanced age limited his strength. When they finally settled her onto the bed, Ezra had prepared all three were winded from the effort. "There's a specialized chair in the wagon," Henry mentioned, dabbing perspiration from his brow. "Custom-built for those who can't walk." The cost was considerable, but Isabel wouldn't let anyone else pay for it. The chair featured wheels instead of traditional legs, with handles that allowed her independent movement. The craftsmanship was remarkable, and Ezra couldn't help but wonder about its substantial cost, questioning how someone unable to work could afford such a device. "I had money set aside," Isabel remarked, as if perceiving his unspoken thoughts. Henry efficiently brought in her possessions: 2 trunks containing clothing and literature, her sewing supplies, and a diminutive wooden container that Isabel held protectively. His movements were hurried, betraying his eagerness to depart. "The agreement stands for 1 year," he informed Ezra once everything was inside. "Should things not work out, she can return, but the payment remains yours regardless." He presented Ezra with a small leather purse that jingled with currency. $50 as agreed, plus this gold timepiece, which felt substantial in Ezra's hand. "It belonged to my brother," Henry explained, eyeing the watch. "Isabel's father. He deserved far better than fate allowed." His gaze met Ezra's directly for the first time. "I trust you'll keep that in mind." Following Henry's departure, an uncomfortable silence descended between Ezra and Isabel. The cabin's dimensions seemed to shrink with 2 occupants. Ezra's years of solitude had left him unaccustomed to sharing living space. "Perhaps I should outline the arrangements," he ventured. "Arrangements?" Isabel's eyebrow arched questioningly. "Regarding how we'll manage things, sleeping arrangements and such. I understand. Her tone remained carefully measured. What did you have in mind? Ezra felt warmth creeping into his cheeks. The bed is yours. I'll take the floor or perhaps construct a cot. And I won't. That is to say, I don't expect. You needn't pretend this is a genuine marriage, Isabel stated softly. I understand your motivations for accepting this arrangement. You require the money, and I need shelter. Nothing more. Though her words should have provided relief, they instead left Ezra feeling diminished and self-serving. It's not just about the money, he said quietly. No. She fixed those piercing emerald eyes on him. Then what is it about? Ezra searched for words that wouldn't reveal his vulnerability. The real reason felt too raw to voice. That crushing solitude had driven him to accept a marriage with a stranger just to have someone to share words with. We'll discover that along the way, he offered. Isabel gave a slight nod. I expect we shall. She wheeled her chair toward the window, gazing at the endless expanse of prairie. It's remarkably silent here. Too silent for most people. I find peace in silence. She paused before asking, What's your occupation here? Your work? I try my hand at cattle ranching. Have about 20 head, though they roam far and wide across the land. Sometimes I work for neighboring ranchers, but, he caught himself before mentioning his tarnished name. But what? Nothing. Just that work's been harder to find lately. Isabel turned her chair to meet his gaze. They informed me about the incident with the Apaches. Ezra felt the words hit him like a physical blow. Who told you? My uncle. He believed I should understand the character of my future husband. Her tone remained neutral, without judgment. He said you fled, leaving your companion to die. That's accurate. The admission felt like shards in his throat. I acted as a coward. Perhaps I still am. Are you certain? What do you mean? I wonder. Are you truly a coward today, or simply a man who once succumbed to fear? Ezra studied her face, stunned. No one had ever posed such a question. The town of Clearwater had condemned him, based on a single moment of weakness. Yet this stranger who had every reason to despise him questioned whether that single act should define his entire existence. I'm uncertain. He spoke truthfully. Then we shall discover that, too. Isabel's smile seemed genuine this time, along with everything else. As daylight strengthened, Ezra considered whether this unusual arrangement might evolve into something more meaningful than two wounded souls merely surviving together. Yet he dared not embrace too much optimism. Hope could be treacherous for people like them. The iron cooking pot clattered to the ground. Beans scattered across the floor as Isabel's wheelchair collided with the stove yet again that morning. This isn't functioning, she declared, her voice tight with frustration and barely contained emotion. Ezra glanced up from his shirt mending at the kitchen table. 2 weeks had passed since Isabel's arrival, and they were both realizing that sharing the confined space of the cabin presented more challenges than either had anticipated. The modest cabin, once a solitary haven, now felt confining and inadequate for 2 occupants, particularly when one relied on a wheelchair for mobility. I can assist you, Ezra offered, beginning to stand. No. Isabel's emerald eyes blazed with determination. I must manage this independently. It's essential that I learn to cope. As she struggled to navigate her chair around the scattered beans, Ezra observed the fundamental issue. The cabin had been constructed for a solitary dweller. The doorframes barely accommodated her wheelchair's width. The kitchen workspace was positioned too high for her comfortable access. The entire dwelling resembled an incomplete jigsaw puzzle. The cabin's design is the obstacle, not your abilities, he remarked softly. Isabel ceased her attempts to clean the spill and turned to face him, her complexion flushed from exertion and discomfort. What are you suggesting? This space wasn't designed for two people, let alone someone requiring wheelchair access. Ezra knelt and began gathering the dispersed beans. We should make some modifications. Renovations require funds we simply don't possess. Your uncle provided us with $50. And I've got timber stored in the barn from my previous plans to expand. Isabel observed his methodical cleaning. You'd truly alter your entire home for my benefit. Ezra contemplated the question. Just weeks ago, this cabin had served as his sanctuary from society. Now the prospect of adapting it to accommodate them both seemed perfectly logical, even imperative. It's our home now, he responded. We should make it livable for both of us. In the following days, Ezra immersed himself in renovation work. He expanded the doorway connecting the kitchen and main room. He lowered a section of the counter to accommodate Isabel's reach. He constructed accessible shelving for her belongings. The most challenging project was crafting a ramp from the porch to ground level. Since her arrival, Isabel had been confined within the cabin's walls, unable to venture outside independently. The ramp would grant her the freedom of unassisted movement. "You're creating quite a commotion out there," she called through the window as he assembled boards under the morning sun. "Worthwhile improvements take time," he replied, "and apparently considerable hammering." Despite her playful remarks, Ezra detected something different in her tone. Perhaps hope or simply gratitude that someone acknowledged her challenges seriously, rather than viewing her as an encumbrance. The renovation proved more demanding than anticipated. His hands, softened by recent inactivity, developed fresh calluses. His muscles protested from continuous bending over sawhorses, yet somehow the physical exertion felt oddly satisfying. For the first time since the devastating Apache attack, he found himself creating rather than merely existing. On the third morning, as he calculated measurements for the wheelchair ramp, Isabel maneuvered herself onto the porch to observe his progress. "This extensive work isn't necessary," she commented. "I'm aware of that." Ezra paused, weighing his response carefully. The complete answer held layers of complexity. Practicality played its part. They required the additional space for better functionality. But beneath that lay something deeper, an emotion he wasn't yet prepared to acknowledge. "I'm doing it because it feels right," he finally responded. "Is that the sole reason?" She sat in the porch's shadow, morning sunlight catching auburn highlights in her hair. Those penetrating emerald eyes studied him with an insight that seemed to pierce through superficial facades. "Perhaps not the only one," he conceded. Later that day, as he approached completion of the ramp, the distinct sound of approaching horses caught his attention. 3 riders emerged from the prairie landscape, and even at a distance, their hostile intent was palpable. "Isabel," he called softly, "please go inside." "What's the matter?" "Just get inside, quickly." Something in his tone must have conveyed urgency, because she complied without protest. Her wheelchair's wheels whispered against the wooden flooring as she retreated from the window. The approaching men were unfamiliar, rough individuals with weathered faces and weapons hanging conspicuously from their holsters. They rode with an air of entitlement, as if the world existed solely for their taking. Their leader, a burly figure sporting a dark beard and beady, malevolent eyes, surveyed the property with calculating interest. "Afternoon," he growled deliberately, ignoring common courtesy. "Quite a property you've got here. Something we can help you with." Ezra maintained composure in his voice. "That depends. We're seeking employment. Heard there might be opportunities around these parts for men willing to handle challenging tasks." His emphasis on those last words sent a chill down Ezra's spine. These weren't honest men seeking legitimate work. "No work available here," Ezra stated firmly. "That's unfortunate." The leader's gaze shifted to the cabin windows. "Word is you've recently acquired a wife. They say she's quite attractive. Must be isolating out here for a woman." Dread settled in Ezra's core. Somehow information about Isabel had circulated beyond Clearwater's boundaries. And not just her presence, but details, painting her as vulnerable. "My wife and I value our solitude," Ezra responded cautiously. Naturally. The man's yellowed teeth showed in an unpleasant smile. "Thing is, we might linger in these parts. Looking for somewhere to rest our mounts, maybe enjoy a warm meal. You understand." The implied threat was unmistakable. The threat lay coiled beneath their courteous words. "The town has accommodations," Ezra stated, "and law enforcement. And inquiries." The man's gaze hardened. "We prefer more secluded locations." His eyes locked onto Ezra's. "Word is you appreciate discretion, particularly when it comes to avoiding confrontation." So his reputation had preceded him here as well. Someone had deliberately directed these men to a supposed coward and his defenseless spouse. "You'd best move along," Ezra warned, his fingers inching toward his holstered weapon. "Or what?" sneered the second rider. "You'll flee again." The youngest of the trio devoured the cabin with predatory eyes. "Makes me curious if the rumors about your wife are accurate. About her condition." Fury blazed through Ezra's consciousness. These weren't mere threats against him. They spoke of Isabel as if she were chattel for the taking. "Leave my property," he commanded softly. "Now that's not very hospitable," their leader drawled. "Especially since we know everything about you, Hawthorne. Know about your cowardice. Know about that invalid you're keeping inside. Seems you're hardly positioned to make demands." The mounts shifted uneasily, detecting the mounting tension. Despite the cool evening air, perspiration trickled down Ezra's spine. 3 opponents against him alone, with a reputation for fleeing at the first sign of conflict. But Isabel had awakened something within him. Though the shame of the Apache incident still lingered, it now mingled with a different emotion. Something akin to rage, but more refined, more purposeful. These men threatened not just his home, but his wife, his opportunity to rebuild meaning from the ruins of his past. "I told you to leave my land." His voice now carried the conviction of a man who'd discovered something worth defending. The leader's smirk vanished. "Sure about this, Hawthorne? They say you don't handle danger well." "We'll see about that." For several heartbeats, only the rustling grass and labored horse breathing broke the silence. Ezra's heart thundered, yet his hands remained steady. Whatever followed retreat wasn't an option. Not anymore. The leader scrutinized Ezra's expression, clearly disliking what he observed. "This isn't finished," he declared finally. "Count on seeing us again." Ezra maintained his vigil until the trio disappeared beyond the horizon. Only then did he notice his trembling. "Ezra!" Isabel called from the entrance. "Are you all right?" He turned toward her. Though pale, she maintained her composure, and he wondered how much of the exchange had reached her ears. "I'm all right," he replied, "but we may face some difficulties ahead." "What sort of difficulties?" Ezra's gaze followed the trail where the riders had disappeared into the distance. The kind that reveals if a man has truly changed or is merely wearing a mask. A deep rumble echoed across the grassland like distant artillery fire, causing Isabel to pause her needlework on the blue cloth spread across her lap. "That storm's moving in quickly," she observed, glancing through the window at the charcoal-colored clouds amassing in the western horizon. Ezra finished securing the final plank on the newly constructed ramp before hastening toward the cabin. The strengthening gusts bent the prairie grass and whirled dust spirals through the yard. Nebraska weather could turn treacherous without notice, and he was determined to secure everything before the tempest struck. "Let's get these shutters closed," he called to Isabel as he approached the entrance. She had already begun wheeling toward the window fixtures. Throughout the past week, they'd discovered an unexpected efficiency in their collaborative efforts. She managed tasks within reach of her wheelchair, while he handled those requiring height or mobility. "Those riders from yesterday," Isabel said as they fortified the cabin. "You believe they'll return?" "Most likely." Ezra checked the final shutters fastening. "Such men don't make empty threats." "What did they want exactly?" Ezra hesitated. He'd been trying to shield Isabel from the harsh reality, but she had a right to know what they could be up against. Resources, he suspected. Provisions, perhaps. He searched for words that wouldn't cause undue alarm. Perhaps they learned about your circumstances, about your condition. Some individuals view a woman with limited mobility as an easy target. Isabel's fingers gripped her chair's armrests tightly. "I understand. But they're mistaken," Ezra interjected quickly. "About your vulnerability, I mean. And about my desertion, if danger approaches. Are they wrong about you leaving?" The question lingered between them like the electric tension before a storm breaks. Ezra had been wrestling with that same doubt for days. "I pray." So he answered truthfully. The initial heavy raindrops pelted against the window panes as they retreated indoors. In moments, the drops intensified into a torrent that pounded the roof like countless small hammers. Lightning illuminated, transforming the exterior world, brilliant white, for split seconds. "I've been contemplating what you mentioned," Isabel said, elevating her voice above the storm's roar. "About this becoming our home now." "What of it? If it's truly our home, then I ought to offer more than just needlework and meal preparation." She reached for a wooden container she'd maintained near her bedside since her arrival. "There's something I've kept from you about my past, before the incident." When Ezra settled into his fireside chair, intrigued, Isabel had revealed minimal details about her history beyond basic information about her family, and the carriage accident that altered everything. "My father operated a general store in Omaha," she said, opening the container delicately. "After my mother's passing, I assisted him in running it. Managed the accounting, tracked inventory, negotiated with vendors." She extracted a substantial ledger bound in brown leather. The pages contained precise numerical columns and meticulous handwriting. "I wasn't merely helping," she elaborated. "By my 20th year, I was managing most of the enterprise myself. Papa was aging, and his vision wasn't suitable for reading small text anymore." Ezra leaned closer. "You managed an entire store." "For 3 years. We prospered too, outperforming most local establishments." Pride tinged her voice. "I had intentions to expand into dry goods, possibly establish a second location." Lightning brightened the cabin, again followed instantly by thunder that rattled the walls. The storm loomed directly above. "What became of the store?" Ezra inquired. Isabel's countenance clouded. "After my accident, my cousin James assumed control. Papa had passed the winter before my injury, so James was the sole remaining male relative. He claimed a woman in my state couldn't possibly operate a business. Despite your years of successful management. Despite that." Her tone was acrid. "He liquidated the entire business within half a year. Claimed he was shielding me from the burdens of commercial responsibilities." Ezra began to comprehend why Isabel had been so adamant about purchasing her own wheelchair and maintaining possession of her personal effects. The carriage accident had stripped her of more than just her ability to walk. She'd been robbed of her autonomy, her means of earning, and her prospects. "Was that the reason your uncle was so determined to arrange your marriage?" he inquired. "That was part of it. James provides a modest stipend to the family for my care, though he never fails to remind me that I'm nothing but an encumbrance. Finding me a husband meant one less responsibility weighing on his conscience." Another lightning flash revealed movement beyond the window. Ezra stiffened, reaching for the rifle stationed near the doorway. "What's wrong?" Isabel questioned. "I thought I glimpsed." He peered through a gap in the window coverings. "Probably just wind-tossed foliage." Yet his instinct suggested otherwise. His years working cattle had taught him to trust these gut feelings. They'd preserved his life on numerous occasions. "Isabel, listen carefully," he whispered, maintaining a hushed tone. "There's a loose plank beneath your bed." Third board from the wall. There's a firearm wrapped in oilcloth underneath. She fixed him with an intense gaze. You concealed a weapon under my bed. Your weapon, from your father's establishment. Your uncle handed it to me with your other possessions. Mentioned you might need it for protection. Papa's revolver. Her voice carried nostalgic tenderness. I'd forgotten Uncle Henry had packed it. Are you still capable of using it? I could hit a playing card from 20 paces when I was 16. A hint of her former self-assurance emerged. The accident didn't affect my hands or vision. A floorboard on the front porch groaned too deliberate to be caused by the storm. Ezra extinguished the lamp, leaving the cabin in darkness, save for the intermittent lightning flashes. Retrieve the gun, he murmured. Isabel swiftly wheeled toward the bed, while Ezra took position by the front window. Through the tempest, he discerned figures circling the cabin. At least 3 individuals, possibly more. They're using the storm for concealment, he observed quietly. Clever. Isabel had secured the pistol and was inspecting its chambers with practiced expertise. Papa always said, criminals prefer to operate when decent folk are looking elsewhere. A voice called from the porch, barely audible above the thunder. Hawthorne, we know you're inside. Open up. It was the same man who'd threatened them the previous day, the one with the dark beard and malevolent gaze. His companions would be positioning themselves strategically around the cabin, blocking potential escape routes. What's your business? Ezra shouted in response. Just seeking shelter from this storm. Show some hospitality, neighbor. Isabel maneuvered her wheelchair closer to Ezra. They're not being truthful. I can sense it. He checked his weapons mechanism. If bullets start flying, keep yourself low and aim for the body. Don't try to just wound them. I know. In the brief illumination from the lightning, Ezra noticed her emerald eyes showed no trace of fear. Instead, they held a steely resolve and fierce intensity that reminded him why she'd succeeded in running her enterprise at such a young age. Hawthorne, the voice had drawn nearer just beyond the entrance. Final opportunity to handle this peacefully. A heavy thud crashed against the wooden barrier, then another. The third impact caused the frame to splinter. Time to face reality, Ezra whispered, lifting his rifle. Face what? He wondered. Whether I'm still the same coward who fled from the Apache raiders. The door exploded inward in a shower of wooden fragments as shadowy figures stormed the cabin. The tempest had delivered more than just rain and thunder. It had brought the confrontation Ezra had been avoiding since Jimmy's death. This time, escape wasn't an option. The initial shot destroyed the lamp on Ezra's table, sending shards of glass raining through the darkened space. Get down, Ezra yelled, diving behind the upturned kitchen table as 2 more rounds pierced the wall where he'd stood moments before. The raging storm masked the gunfire, ensuring no assistance would come from nearby farms. Isabel had already lowered herself in her wheelchair, her father's revolver steady in her grasp. Lightning illuminated the broken shutters, revealing 3 assailants spreading throughout the cabin. The bearded leader toppled furniture while his men secured the windows. Should have cooperated, Hawthorne, he bellowed over the thunder. Now we do this the hard way. Ezra's rifle roared, and the youngest attacker twisted sideways, clutching his wounded shoulder. The injured man's agonized cry merged with the howling wind. That's for threatening my wife. Ezra ejected the spent cartridge. Yet even as he spoke, uncertainty crept into his thoughts. 3 armed attackers against a known deserter and a wheelchair-bound woman. The odds weren't favorable. Fear's familiar whisper suggested surrender. Give them what they wanted. Pray they'd spare Isabel. Behind you. Isabel's warning came just in time. Ezra rolled aside as a gun barrel swung toward his head. The second attacker had flanked through the kitchen, seeking a clear shot. Ezra's elbow struck the man's wrist, sending the weapon clattering into the darkness. They wrestled violently on the floorboards, the outlaw's brute strength battling against Ezra's raw desperation. A crushing blow landed on Ezra's jaw, sending bursts of light dancing across his vision. Isabel's revolver cracked through the air, and the outlaw recoiled with a startled howl. "You shot me," he sputtered, gaping at the crimson stain spreading across his thigh. "I was targeting your chest," Isabel replied, with ice in her voice. "My aim isn't what it used to be." The injured man scrambled toward his fallen weapon, but Ezra's boot sent it skittering into the shadows. Outside, the tempest reached its crescendo, rain pounding the cabin roof like nature's artillery. "Surrender now, Hawthorne," the leader barked from his shelter behind the overturned bed. "You're only making this worse for everyone involved." "Worse for you, perhaps," Ezra responded methodically, reloading his rifle. His hands moved with newfound precision, his earlier tremors replaced by crystalline focus. This confrontation felt nothing like the Apache ambush. Back then, he'd been caught unaware, overwhelmed by warriors materializing like spirits from the landscape. Now his purpose burned bright and clear, defending his homestead, his dreams, and the woman who'd become his reason for living. "Listen carefully." The leader's tone had grown urgent. "We know about the payment, $50 plus the gold timepiece. Hand them over, and we'll depart peacefully." So that explained their true motivation. Someone had revealed Isabel's dowry. Ezra pondered how many others knew of their arrangement. How many might view them as vulnerable targets? "That money belongs to me," Ezra declared. "Earned by wedding a cripple. That's not earning, that's taking charity." The vicious words struck Isabel visibly. Ezra watched her confidence waver, doubt clouding her expression. These intruders threatened more than their lives. They were attacking the delicate bond forming between them. "Pay them no mind," Ezra murmured, edging closer to her wheelchair. "They understand nothing about us, do they?" Isabel's response barely carried over the storm's fury. "Isn't that precisely what this is? You married me for money, while I came because no one else would have me." Thunder boomed overhead, but Ezra detected another sound: horses whinnying in the yard. Additional riders approached. The three assailants weren't alone. "Backups arrived," the leader gloated. "Should have accepted my terms, Hawthorne." But when the door burst wide, it wasn't more outlaws who entered. Sheriff Coleman stumbled in from the downpour, his badge catching the lightning's glow. Two deputies followed, weapons at the ready. "Lower your guns," Coleman commanded. "The law's here." The leader's complexion drained of color. "Sheriff, how did you track us?" Mrs. Patterson had spotted riders moving through the storm, suspecting they were the same gang that had been raiding ranches throughout the month. Coleman surveyed the scene: injured outlaws, bullet-riddled walls, and Ezra and Isabel standing their ground. "Seems we arrived at a crucial moment." The fight drained from the outlaws swiftly. Confronted with armed lawmen instead of an isolated rancher, they yielded without further resistance. While the deputies secured the criminals, Coleman made his way to Ezra. "You handled this well, son. These outlaws have been terrorizing homesteads across the territory. We've been searching for them for some time." "How many properties have they targeted?" Ezra inquired. 7 confirmed cases. 2 men dead, multiple others injured. Coleman regarded the wounded outlaws with contempt. They deliberately choose victims they believe can't defend themselves. Remote homesteads, elderly residents, families with young ones. "Or cowards with invalid wives," Ezra remarked with bitterness. "Is that your view of yourself?" The sheriff examined Ezra's expression. "Listen, son, I've worn this badge for 15 years. True cowards don't stand their ground when outnumbered. They don't place themselves between danger and those they cherish." As the lawmen prepared to depart with their captives, the leader hurled a final barb at Ezra. "Keep your broken woman, Hawthorne. You're perfectly matched." The venomous words lingered after their departure, tainting what should have been a moment of triumph. Ezra looked toward Isabel, but she averted her gaze. "Is this how others perceive us?" she whispered. that were both too damaged for anyone else. Ezra knelt beside her wheelchair, weighing his response carefully. Should others' opinions matter? They matter to me. Tears shimmered in her emerald eyes. I believed we might be creating something genuine here, something beyond financial arrangements and practicality. We are, Ezra stated resolutely. What we share transcends our initial circumstances. It's about who we're choosing to become. Yet even as he spoke, doubt crept into his mind. Had financial gain been his sole motivation for marrying Isabel? Was she remaining only due to lack of alternatives? The outlaw's cruel taunt had forced them to confront uncomfortable truths they'd been evading. Outside, the tempest was finally passing, leaving behind the crisp scent of rain-cleansed earth. But within the cabin, an emotional storm was just beginning to brew. I need space to process this, Isabel murmured, guiding her wheelchair toward the window, to understand what all of this means for us, what we truly represent to each other. Ezra observed her form silhouetted against the storm-illuminated sky, feeling something shatter within his heart. Though they'd weathered the physical assault, the real challenge to their bond was only now emerging. Daybreak's rays penetrated the bullet-marked cabin walls, casting golden patterns across the wooden flooring that should have appeared enchanting, but only served as stark reminders of their near-fatal encounter. Isabel remained motionless at the kitchen table, her morning meal untouched, fixated on a newly arrived letter. The correspondence was written on premium stationery, the type reserved for significant matters by people of influence. James sent this, she stated, eyes still fixed on the page. From Omaha, Ezra's heart sank. Following the confrontation with the raiders, after those harsh words, questioning their marriage's authenticity, the last thing they needed was meddling from Isabel's relatives. What's his purpose? He's offering an escape route. Her tone was devoid of emotion. He's changed his stance on women in commerce, promising to return half of Father's store if I come back to Omaha. I could earn my own money again, have my own space above the shop. She meticulously folded the letter, her actions deliberate and measured. He's even prepared to compensate you for your involvement. Twice Uncle Henry's original payment. The statement struck Ezra like physical blows. He's essentially trying to purchase your freedom. What are your thoughts? For the first time since the letter's arrival, Isabel met his gaze. Her emerald eyes harbored a profound melancholy that constricted his chest. I need to understand your true motives for marrying me, Ezra. Not the romantic declarations from yesterday's confrontation. The absolute truth. Ezra settled into the chair opposite, her hands tightly clasped beneath the table. This was the discussion he'd been avoiding since the raiders forced them to scrutinize their relationship. You want candor. Here it is. The financial aspect played a role, he confessed. I won't deny that. $50 was more money than I'd seen in quite some time. Isabel acknowledged this with a slight nod, her expression unchanged. What more? The solitude was crushing me. So much so that I'd begun treating my horse like a conversation partner. This cabin felt like a mausoleum with just me in it. Is there more? Ezra examined her features, searching for any indication of what she hoped to hear, but her face remained unreadable. You intrigued me, he finally admitted. The way you challenged Buck Morrison that first day. How you looked at me, as if you perceived something others had missed. I'd never encountered someone who maintained such resilience despite their hardships. Unbroken. Isabel savored the word, as if tasting its essence. Is that what you perceive when you look at me, and what reflection greets you in the mirror? She fell silent, observing specks of dust dancing in the sunbeams that filtered through the bullet-scarred walls. I see a woman who once commanded a thriving enterprise, but now stumbles through preparing a simple breakfast, she confessed. I see someone whose family views her as such a burden that they'd rather pay strangers to assume responsibility for her care. Surely that's not the entirety of who you are, he countered, his voice taking on an edge of frustration. Tell me truthfully, Ezra, if I could walk unassisted, if my family still held me in high regard, if I possessed my own wealth and autonomy, would you have desired me then, or does your affection stem from our shared brokenness? The question lingered between them like a gauntlet thrown. Ezra recognized this as the pivotal moment in their relationship, not the threat of outlaws, but the raw examination of their innermost feelings. I cannot say with certainty, he responded softly. Had you remained the successful proprietor you once were, our paths would never have crossed. That's evading the question. It's the only truth I can offer. Ezra rose and approached the window, gazing out at the endless expanse of prairie, stretching in every direction. I can't speculate about who I might have been under different circumstances, but I know who I am now, and I know who you are. What we've created here feels more authentic than anything I've experienced before. Behind him came the gentle sound of Isabel's wheelchair wheels against the wooden planks as she positioned herself beside him. James promises to restore my former life, she revealed. Independence, respect, an opportunity to prove I'm more than my limitations. It sounds like everything you lost. Indeed it does. She reached for his hand. But it's not everything I've discovered. Ezra glanced down at her, daring to hope. What have you discovered? A partner who recognizes my strength rather than fixating on my limitations. A man who transformed his entire home to accommodate me. Someone who stands firm when others would flee. I nearly did run, Ezra admitted. When those men first broke in, every instinct urged me to surrender. To yield to their demands and pray they'd leave us unharmed. But you didn't. No. Because fleeing meant losing you, and I realized that prospect terrified me more than death itself. Isabel smiled. The first genuine smile graced her face since receiving the letter. That's the most heartfelt declaration anyone has ever made to me. Although perhaps it's not particularly romantic to be cherished by someone who considers himself a coward. You're far from a coward, Ezra Hawthorne. A coward wouldn't reconstruct his dwelling for another's comfort. A coward wouldn't confront 3 armed assailants. A coward wouldn't choose love when safety beckons. She lifted James's letter. Do you know what response I'll give my cousin? What? That I already possess everything essential. A business alliance with the man who holds my heart. In a place where we can create something meaningful together. Business alliance. Isabel's eyes glimmered with the same resolve he'd witnessed when she confronted the outlaws. I've been contemplating the potential of this land. There's a primary trail merely 2 miles south. Travelers require provisions, sustenance, a location to rest their mounts. You're suggesting opening a store. I'm proposing we establish one, together. Combining my business acumen with your insight into cowboys' and ranchers' needs. She motioned toward the damaged structure. We'll need to rebuild following last night's events. Why not construct something grander, something beneficial to the entire territory? Ezra gazed at her, recognizing not the broken woman her family had cast aside, but the brilliant entrepreneur she'd always been. James' funds could provide our starting capital, she elaborated. But this time, as genuine partners, equal stakeholders. You'd forfeit the opportunity to reclaim your former life for this. My previous life vanished, Ezra. It perished in that carriage incident 2 years ago. Isabel enveloped his hand in both of hers. But my new chapter, our shared future, is just dawning. Beyond the walls, a hawk soared above the prairie, gliding effortlessly on air currents. It reminded Ezra that sometimes life's most beautiful moments emerge from adapting to circumstances, rather than resisting them. Equal partners, he repeated, considering the phrase. In every aspect. Despite potential gossip, even if they claim we're merely two damaged souls settling for each other. Isabel's laughter rang out, pure and crystalline like spring water. Let them gossip. We'll be too occupied proving their assumptions wrong. The hammer slipped from Ezra's perspiring grasp, nearly crushing his foot, as hostile voices carried across the prairie from the main road. There they are. Buck Morrison's bellow resonated half a mile away. The coward and his cripple wife playing house. Ezra straightened from his position nailing boards for their new store's front wall. 3 months had elapsed since the outlaw attack, and their trading post was finally materializing. But now a group of riders approached, radiating the kind of deliberate hostility that spelled serious trouble. Isabel, he called toward the cabin. We have unwelcome visitors approaching. Isabel wheeled herself onto the porch, raising her hand to shield her eyes from the bright October sunlight. She counted the approaching riders, 8, maybe 9 of them, with Buck leading the group. The situation had evolved beyond just local opposition from Clearwater. News of Ezra and Isabel's flourishing enterprise had circulated throughout the territory, stirring discontent among many. Their modest trading post was now threatening the revenue streams of well-established merchants in larger settlements. Mr. Hawthorne, called an unfamiliar voice. Alongside Buck rode a slender gentleman in fine attire, his appearance suggesting a life devoid of manual labor. I'm Edgar Whitman, representing the Clearwater Business Association. We need to discuss some matters. Yes, the group dismounted near their partially constructed store, their horses restless and pawing at the ground. Ezra noted the mixture of envy, hostility, and something more sinister in their expressions. Quite an enterprise you've established here, Whitman remarked, surveying the area with evident scorn. Unfortunately, you've neglected to obtain the necessary permits for this construction. What permits? Ezra maintained his composure, though dread began to settle in his chest. Construction permits, business licenses, health certifications. Whitman produced an official document adorned with various stamps and signatures. The territorial government considers these matters quite seriously. Buck's face split into a predatory grin. You can't simply establish a business without following proper protocols, Hawthorne. There are regulations to consider. Regulations that mysteriously don't affect other establishments. Isabel's voice rang clear from her position on the porch. It's peculiar how these rules surfaced only after our success became apparent. Whitman's complexion darkened. Mrs. Hawthorne, this concerns legal compliance, not personal bias. Does it? Then why weren't these requirements mentioned when we submitted our initial documentation 3 months ago? The thin man averted his gaze. The documentation was insufficient. The documentation was flawless, Isabel stated firmly. I've managed business paperwork since my youth. I'm well versed in all requirements. A robust man wearing a sheriff's badge stepped forward. Ma'am, I'm Deputy Marshal Hayes. These gentlemen have registered formal complaints regarding your operation. Safety infractions, improper documentation, interference with established commerce. Ezra felt his anger rising. What safety infractions? What interference? Hayes consulted another document. You're trading goods without proper inspection certificates. Your structure fails to meet territorial commercial building standards. Several Clearwater businesses claim you're engaging in unfair pricing practices. You mean competitive pricing, Isabel retorted, achieved through efficiency, superior service, and fresher inventory. That's legitimate competition, Marshal, perfectly within the law. Buck's harsh laugh cut through the air. Legal for legitimate businesses, perhaps. But this is just a charity case, masquerading as something significant. The insult lingered in the atmosphere like gun smoke after a shot. Ezra felt anger surge through him, his vision tinting crimson. But Isabel's composed demeanor prevented him from making a rash decision. Mr. Morrison, she addressed him with calculated politeness. I have our detailed sales records here if you're interested in seeing exactly how charitable we are. She retrieved an elegant leather-bound ledger from her lap. In the previous month alone, we provided service to 47 travelers, generated $300 in supply sales, and offered emergency accommodation to 2 families during the unexpected early blizzard. Whitman's expression shifted to disbelief at the figures. $300, that's simply not possible. Feel free to verify with our patrons if you doubt these figures. Isabel responded, her smile as cutting as a well-honed blade. The Henderson family traveling from Kansas. The Murphy cattle drive. Captain Morrison's supply wagons. Ah, yes, that would be your brother, wouldn't it, Buck? Buck's complexion drained of color. What are you referring to? Your brother Robert purchased supplies here just last week. He specifically mentioned our competitive prices and superior quality provisions between here and Denver. He was quite generous with his praise, actually. The assembled men exchanged uneasy looks. If Captain Morrison, one of the region's most esteemed freight transporters, was patronizing the Hawthorne trading post, others would surely follow suit. The legal concerns remain unresolved, Hayes interjected, though his tone lacked authority. The complaints have been officially filed. Then I must investigate. By all means, investigate, Isabel responded, but ensure it's conducted fairly. Review our records. Examine our premises, speak with our customers. Don't simply accept the claims of competitors who are losing business due to superior service. Deputy Marshal Hayes appeared torn between his official duties and practical reasoning. I'll require access to all your documentation, business records, construction plans, supplier agreements. Certainly. Isabel maneuvered her wheelchair toward the cabin. Ezra, would you assist the marshal with the files? They're chronologically and categorically arranged. As Hayes followed them inside, the remaining men gathered around Whitman and Buck. Through the open window, Ezra caught fragments of their discussion. More profitable than anticipated. Can't close them down on these grounds. Need to find another strategy. When Hayes emerged 20 minutes later, his demeanor had transformed entirely. Mrs. Hawthorne, your documentation is exemplary. The most thorough I've encountered in any territorial business. Every transaction recorded. Every supplier properly certified. Every regulation meticulously followed. Whitman's mouth gaped in astonishment. But these complaints are entirely baseless, Hayes concluded firmly. This establishment is operating completely within legal parameters. He regarded Buck with evident disdain. Perhaps you gentlemen should concentrate on enhancing your own enterprises rather than attempting to destroy another's. After the deputy marshal departed with most of the riders, Buck and Whitman remained behind. Their expressions revealed the seething frustration of men whose schemes had crumbled before them. This isn't finished, Buck muttered under his breath. You may have your fancy permits and official papers, but you haven't changed from what you've always been. A fortunate weakling who got a lucky break. Perhaps Ezra responded calmly, but I'm a weakling with a brilliant spouse and a thriving enterprise. What do you amount to? Buck's fingers twitched toward his firearm, but Whitman seized his forearm. Not in this place. Not at this moment. As their horses carried them away, Isabel emerged onto the veranda. They'll return. I know. Ezra retrieved his hammer and resumed his work on the storefront. But we'll be prepared next time. The next confrontation might not involve business disputes or legal matters, Isabel cautioned. Men of Buck's nature rarely accept defeat. When legitimate means fail them, they resort to alternative methods. Ezra hammered a nail into the pine plank with 3 precise blows. Then we'll confront whatever challenges arise. As one. Yet as he observed the trail of dust from the departing horsemen, he pondered what new schemes they were devising. Their prosperity had made them vulnerable in unexpected ways. In the Nebraska Territory of 1867, there were numerous ways to ruin someone without violating any laws. The sound of approaching horses set them both on edge. But this arrival brought welcome news. Captain Morrison Buck's elder sibling approached with a fully loaded supply wagon and a warm smile on his weather-worn face. Evening, folks. Word reached me about today's excitement. We managed just fine, Ezra replied. Glad to hear it. My brother's always been one to stir up unnecessary trouble. Robert Morrison descended from his wagon. I've brought those supplies you requested from Denver, and I've got some information you might find valuable. What sort of information? Isabel inquired. The kind that suggests your trading post is about to see significantly more business. The territorial government's establishing a new mail route that passes right by here. 3 deliveries weekly, beginning next month. Ezra and Isabel shared a meaningful look. A mail route meant consistent traffic-dependable customers and official recognition that would make it considerably harder for rivals to interfere. There's additional news, Captain Morrison added. They're seeking an official mail station along this route. Someone dependable to handle deliveries and support postal operations. Interested. Isabel looked at Ezra. Definitely interested. As Captain Morrison unloaded their supplies, Ezra realized their adversaries had made a fatal error. By attempting to destroy their business through legal means, they'd only highlighted how efficiently and successfully it operated. Now that success was poised to expand beyond their wildest expectations. Yet he remained aware that Buck Morrison and his cohorts wouldn't surrender easily. If legal avenues proved futile, they would resort to alternative tactics. Something more perilous. The battle for their livelihood was only commencing. Flames illuminated the evening sky with an amber glow as Ezra spurred his mount toward the trading post, his pulse racing with each thundering stride that drew him nearer to catastrophe. He'd been collecting correspondence in town when the inferno began. Now 2 miles distant, he could observe the fiery reflection against the heavens and detect the acrid scent of smoke carried by the breeze. Everything he and Isabel had established together was ablaze. Let her be unharmed, he murmured, pressing his horse faster across the darkened grassland. Let her be unharmed. Upon reaching the final ridge, the scene before him proved simultaneously better and worse than anticipated. The trading post was consumed by fire, yet the cabin remained intact 50 yards away. And there, outlined against the blaze, was Isabel in her wheelchair, orchestrating a water brigade of neighboring volunteers who'd arrived to assist. Ezra, she called as he dismounted. Thank heaven you're here. Are you injured? He knelt beside her chair, searching for wounds. I'm unharmed. But the store... Her voice faltered as another portion of the roof surrendered to the flames in a cascade of embers. What caused this? I'm uncertain. I was inside the cabin when smoke reached my nostrils. When I ventured outside, the entire rear wall was already engulfed. Tom Henderson, a cattleman from 5 miles south, approached with an empty pail. We rushed here immediately, but the blaze had gained too much momentum. My deepest sympathies, friends. Additional neighbors arrived throughout the night, bringing water and assistance. The Johnsons from eastward, the Pattersons from the north, even elderly Mrs. Mackenzie, who seldom ventured from her property. Former strangers now united to salvage what remained. By daybreak, the trading post had been reduced to smoldering debris and blackened beams. Half a year's effort, Isabel remarked softly, surveying the devastation. All our provisions, merchandise, tools. We'll reconstruct, Ezra assured despite his leaden heart. We've done it before, we'll manage again. Using what resources we invested everything in winter inventory. Insurance compensation won't cover half our losses. Sheriff Coleman appeared with daylight, his expression severe as he investigated the wreckage. Following an hour examining the ruins, he approached carrying something. Discovered this beneath some planks, he stated, displaying a glass vessel still reeking of coal oil. This conflagration was deliberate. Ezra felt icy rage settle in his core. Someone orchestrated our destruction. It appears so, but who? Captain Morrison rode up with his usual freight wagon, but this time his brother Buck occupied the seat beside him, wrists bound behind his back. I might have some insight into that matter. Found him attempting to peddle new merchandise in Millerville, Robert explained what. Items matching the description of your store's inventory. Despite his predicament, Buck maintained a defiant expression. "You've got no proof against me," Buck challenged. Sheriff Coleman retrieved his notebook. "3 witnesses spotted you and Whitman heading this way yesterday evening. Plus, the Millerville merchant recalls you trying to sell goods still carrying the scent of smoke." "That's insufficient for conviction," Buck declared, though his voice wavered slightly. "Perhaps," Coleman acknowledged. "But it's enough to prompt deeper inquiries, such as why Edgar Whitman departed on the midnight stage following your failed sales attempt." The sheriff's words visibly rattled Buck. His accomplice had deserted him, taking his portion of the stolen merchandise and leaving Buck to shoulder the consequences alone. "He abandoned you, didn't he?" Isabel observed softly. "Left you to face the consequences while he fled with the profits." Buck's silence spoke volumes. "Why?" Ezra questioned. "Why torch our establishment? We weren't causing you significant harm." "Weren't causing harm." Buck's composure finally shattered. "You were demolishing everything. Your establishment was drawing customers from businesses across 3 counties. And for what? So a coward and a cripple could pretend at significance." The familiar taunts should have wounded Ezra, but they'd lost their sting. Too much had transpired. Too much had been demonstrated for such words to carry weight anymore. "We offered superior service," Isabel stated evenly. "Better pricing, fresher inventory, more accessible location. That's business fundamentals." "That's business when competition is fair," Buck retorted. "But who can compete against a sympathy story, the disabled woman and her reformed coward husband? How can legitimate businesses match that?" Sheriff Coleman scoffed. "Legitimate businesses! You torched their store and pilfered their goods. Speaking of legitimacy." As Coleman secured Buck and his wagon for transport to jail, more community members arrived. The Hendersons brought provisions and water. The Pattersons volunteered assistance with debris removal. Mrs. Mackenzie approached slowly carrying a small cloth pouch. "Collected from those unable to attend," she explained, placing the bag in Isabel's hands. For the reconstruction, the pouch contained coins and currency modest contributions from individual families that collectively amounted to over $50. These hardworking folks had offered what they could barely afford, willingly donating to help their neighbors rebuild. "Why?" Isabel questioned, tears flowing down her cheeks. "Why would you extend such kindness to us?" "Because you showed us the same kindness first," Tom Henderson explained matter-of-factly. "When my son fractured his leg last month, you provided us supplies on credit without hesitation. When the Pattersons experienced wagon trouble, you offered them shelter and assistance with repairs. And during that unexpected early blizzard," Mrs. Mackenzie chimed in, "you welcomed anyone seeking warmth and sustenance, maintained fair prices, and turned no one away." Ezra Servisha, the gathered crowd. Cowboys and farmers, families, and single men. People who'd evolved beyond mere customers. They had transformed into a community. "We'll rebuild," he declared, his voice gaining conviction with each word. "Bigger and better than before." "Count us in," Captain Morrison affirmed. "I'll communicate with the Territorial Mail Service." They still required an official mail station, and after recent events, they'd want to ensure adequate support for the establishment. "I can supply lumber," Patterson volunteered. "Have trees needing removal anyway." "And I can assist with the building," Henderson added. Was a carpenter before switching to ranching. As daylight strengthened, Ezra experienced something he hadn't felt since before the Apache attack. The sensation of belonging to something greater than himself. These individuals weren't offering assistance out of mere sympathy. They were investing in their collective future in the community that had developed around the trading post. "There's one additional matter," Sheriff Coleman announced as he prepared to depart with his captive. The territorial governor had learned about the situation, about the legal disputes, business rivalry, and now the arson. He's dispatching an official investigator to examine potential organized harassment of legitimate enterprises. Buck's complexion paled. What's the implication? It means if there's evidence of systematic illegal activities aimed at eliminating competition, all involved parties could face federal prosecution, including your associate Whitman, wherever he's hiding. As Coleman's wagon vanished toward town, Ezra and Isabel remained amid their store's remnants, encircled by friends they hadn't realized they possessed. Buck was accurate about one thing, Isabel remarked softly. What's that? We were dismantling the traditional business model. But perhaps that's not necessarily negative. She motioned toward their neighbors, already planning the rebuilding effort. Perhaps it's time for something improved. Ezra clasped Isabel's hand, gazing across the prairie landscape that had once appeared desolate and unwelcoming. Now it radiated potential filled with individuals who'd chosen to align themselves with their cause against those seeking their downfall. Something superior, he silently acknowledged. Something deserving of their struggle. While the flames had consumed their establishment, they'd also illuminated the resilience of what they'd truly created. Beyond mere commerce, they'd fostered a genuine community. This foundation proved impervious to the corrosive effects of envy or animosity. The gleaming ribbon adorning their new trading post's facade symbolized a fulfilled promise, as what seemed like half the territory's population gathered to celebrate their grand reopening. The turnout is overwhelming, Isabel murmured to Ezra as they observed from their rebuilt store's porch. The new structure boasted double the original's dimensions, featuring spacious aisles, accommodating her wheelchair, and attached living quarters in the rear. It shouldn't surprise you, Ezra responded, watching families arriving in wagons from distances up to 50 miles. News spreads rapidly when honorable folks demonstrate their worth. Yet even while exchanging pleasantries with arriving guests, Ezra's attention repeatedly drifted to a solitary horseman on the distant hillside. The mysterious figure had maintained their vigil for over an hour, neither advancing nor retreating. Ladies and gentlemen, announced Mayor Stevens from Clearwater, a portly individual who'd shown minimal interest in their enterprise until the territorial governor began investigating merchant harassment. Before this ribbon-cutting ceremony, I'd like to share some thoughts. The crowd drew closer. Ezra estimated at least 100 attendees, ranchers, cowboys, traveling merchants, families, even former skeptical business owners who'd previously viewed them as unwanted competition. 6 months ago, Stevens proceeded, this couple encountered devastating adversity. Criminals and jealous rivals destroyed their livelihood through arson. Yet they persevered. More significantly, this community ensured their perseverance. Applause swept through the gathering. Ezra noticed Mrs. Mackenzie's emotional response behind her handkerchief, while Tom Henderson proudly admired his carpentry craftsmanship on the new structure. Today transcends a mere store reopening, the mayor declared. We're celebrating community triumph over destructive forces. More applause followed, but Ezra's disquiet intensified. The hillside rider had decreased their distance, their bearing triggering unsettling recognition. Ezra, Isabel whispered, following his line of sight. Is that figure familiar? Before he could respond, Sheriff Coleman approached the ribbon, wielding ceremonial scissors. Mrs. Hawthorne, would you please do the honors? Isabel guided her wheelchair forward, but just as she reached for the scissors, a thunderous gunshot shattered the prairie silence. The bullet splintered the wooden porch post mere inches from where she sat. Everyone take cover, Coleman bellowed, drawing his weapon as panic rippled through the assembled crowd. The mysterious rider was now charging toward them, and Ezra's blood ran cold as he recognized the face. Edgar Whitman, the businessman who'd vanished after the devastating fire, had returned with revenge burning in his eyes and a rifle clutched in his grip. You destroyed everything I had. Whitman's voice carried across the distance, filled with unbridled rage. My standing in society, my business relationships, My entire existence." Another shot rang out, sending glass flying as it shattered a window in their newly constructed store. Mothers frantically gathered their children seeking shelter behind wagons, while men instinctively reached for their firearms. "Whitman's completely unhinged," Coleman muttered, steadying his pistol. "He's too far out for an accurate shot." "Not for someone like me," came a composed voice beside them. All eyes turned to Isabel, who held her father's Colt revolver with remarkable steadiness, her hands unwavering despite the chaos unfolding around them. "Isabel, don't," Ezra pleaded. "The distance is too great, but if you miss, I promise you I won't." Her response carried the self-assurance of someone who dedicated years to perfecting their aim behind her father's establishment. "Whether it's 20 paces or 200, I never miss my mark." Whitman was rapidly approaching, working his rifle's lever in preparation for another assault. Within moments, he'd be close enough to claim a victim from the crowd. Isabel's revolver roared once. Whitman's rifle went flying as her bullet struck its wooden stock with precision. His startled horse reared violently, throwing him to the ground, where he lay motionless and defeated. Cheers erupted as Coleman and several townsmen rushed to apprehend the dazed assailant. But Ezra couldn't take his eyes off Isabel, who calmly reloaded her father's pistol with unwavering hands. "Where did you acquire such marksmanship?" he asked, awestruck. "Remember when I mentioned hitting a playing card at 20 paces at 16? She glanced up with a knowing smile, though I never specified it was always the ace of spades. As Coleman led the handcuffed Whitman away, the crowd's fear transformed back into jubilation. The ribbon-cutting ceremony continued, but now it carried deeper significance. It became a testament to their community's unwavering spirit. "Before we proceed," Isabel announced, her voice rising above the crowd, "there's something I need to share." The chatter subsided as people gathered closer to listen. "When I first arrived here, I believed myself broken, worthless, nothing more than an unwanted burden." Her words resonated clearly across the prairie breeze. "I was mistaken about many things, but most profoundly about what defines a person's true value." Her gaze shifted from Ezra to the assembled faces of their friends and neighbors. "Once I measured my worth by my ability to walk, to manage a business independently, to stand on my own 2 feet. But life has taught me that our real value lies in the bonds we forge with others, in how we support and uplift one another through life's darkest moments." Soft murmurs of agreement spread through the gathered crowd. "This establishment represents more than just commerce," she continued. "It stands as testament to what determined people can achieve when they unite in purpose. Buck Morrison and Edgar Whitman sought our destruction because they failed to grasp this fundamental truth. They mistakenly believed that success meant crushing others rather than elevating themselves through honest effort." "What became of Morrison?" a voice called from the crowd. Sheriff Coleman stepped forward. "Buck Morrison received a 5-year sentence in the Territorial Penitentiary for his crimes of arson and theft. Edgar Whitman will soon join him once the circuit judge arrives next month." The crowd hummed with collective approval. Justice had prevailed, and those who had terrorized legitimate businesses throughout the territory were finally facing their day of reckoning. Now Isabel declared, accepting the scissors from Coleman, "Let's inaugurate this establishment and demonstrate what our community can achieve together." The ribbon parted as cheers erupted from the crowd. The townspeople eagerly streamed inside to explore the new trading post, admiring its spacious aisles, meticulously arranged shelves, and thoughtful layout that accommodated everyone's needs. Mrs. Hawthorne called a voice from behind. An elegantly dressed woman with compassionate eyes approached the porch. "I represent the Territorial Women's Association, Martha Caldwell. We've been following your remarkable journey with keen interest." "Oh," Isabel's expression showed intrigue. "We would be honored to have you address our upcoming annual convention in Denver, sharing your experiences of overcoming adversity and building a thriving business, despite physical challenges." Ezra noticed Isabel's eyes sparkle with enthusiasm. You're asking me to deliver a public address. We want you to be an inspiration for other women facing similar obstacles. Your story demonstrates that limitations need not define our potential. As Mrs. Caldwell elaborated on the invitation, details, Ezra felt overwhelming pride in his wife. She had transformed from someone cast aside by her family into a beacon of strength and determination for others. There's another matter, Mrs. Caldwell continued. The territorial governor has taken notice of your business acumen and community leadership. He's considering you for a position on the new Territorial Commerce Commission. What would such a role entail? Ezra inquired. Establishing fair business practices across Nebraska Territory, ensuring legitimate enterprises are protected from unscrupulous competitors. Isabel exchanged glances with Ezra, her eyes questioning. This appointment would bring travel opportunities, recognition and influence extending far beyond their small prairie community. Simply being considered is an honor, she responded thoughtfully. But I need time to consult with my husband and business associate. As the festivities stretched into the evening hours, Ezra and Isabel found themselves alone on their veranda, observing the final guests loading their wagons under the gentle glow of lantern light. The commission appointment, Ezra mentioned softly. It's quite an extraordinary opportunity. Indeed it is. You ought to accept it. Isabel shifted to face him. Do you really think so? You'd be making a difference for people throughout the territory, ensuring that what we endured doesn't befall other honest merchants. But what about our establishment, the life we've built here? Ezra motioned toward their flourishing trading post, toward their departing friends, toward the tight-knit community they'd helped establish. This place will remain here. These people will always be part of our extended family. But you now have the chance to create impact on a grander scale. Isabel's face brightened as she clasped his hand. We have a chance. Mrs. Caldwell mentioned the commission position includes provisions for a business partner and counsel. You want me by your side. I want us to confront whatever lies ahead together, just as we always have. As the final wagon vanished into the night, Ezra gazed across the prairie that once seemed desolate and unwelcoming. Now it brimmed with potential, with cherished friendships, with optimism for tomorrow. The coming days would present fresh challenges, novel opportunities, unexpected adventures. But tonight, they possessed everything essential one another. A prosperous enterprise, and a community that had proven more resilient than any force attempting to destroy it. The solitary rancher and the woman society had rejected had evolved into something neither had anticipated, the jewel of the plains. 3 years later, Isabel's voice resonated with authority across the crowded Denver auditorium as she addressed the largest assembly of the Territorial Commerce Commission in Nebraska's history. When we established our trading post, folks claimed we were merely two damaged souls who'd settled for each other out of desperation, she declared from the speaker's platform, her wheelchair positioned to ensure maximum visibility to the audience. They were mistaken about the desperation, but they had one thing right. We were both broken. Chuckles rippled through the assemblage of entrepreneurs, government officials, and territorial representatives who'd gathered to hear the woman who'd transformed from a discarded burden into one of the territory's most esteemed advocates for fair commerce. But brokenness doesn't equate to worthlessness, Isabel continued. Sometimes it simply means you're prepared to be reconstructed into something more formidable. From his position in the front row, Ezra experienced the familiar surge of pride he felt whenever he witnessed his wife address a public gathering. The timid, resentful woman who had first arrived at his homestead by wagon had transformed remarkably. She now commanded the attention of hundreds with ease, wielded enough influence to reshape territorial legislation, and earned such respect that even the governor sought her counsel on commercial matters. The critical question before us today, Isabel declared, is whether Nebraska Territory will persist in allowing the kind of bullying and coercion that forced my husband and me to defend our business at gunpoint, or if we'll establish a framework where fair competition prevails over underhanded tactics." The auditorium erupted in applause. During the 3 years following the destruction of their trading post by arson, Isabel had meticulously catalogued more than 40 comparable incidents throughout the territory. Small enterprises systematically eliminated by larger rivals who employed legal harassment, intimidation tactics, and occasionally direct violence to squash competition. The Hawthorne Fair Commerce Act, she proceeded, will implement strict penalties for business intimidation, establish a fair appeals process for wrongly accused merchants, and crucially ensure that success stems from superior customer service rather than competitor elimination. More applause followed, but Ezra's attention was drawn to a disturbance near the auditorium's rear. A figure was forcing his way through the assembled crowd, his movements betraying unmistakable anger even from afar. "Mrs. Hawthorne," the man called out, his voice piercing through the applause. "What about legitimate business owners ruined by your preferential treatment?" Security personnel moved to intercept him, but Isabel gestured for them to stand down. "I welcome your questions, sir. Please tell me your name." "James Whitman. Edgar was my brother." Silence descended upon the gathering. Edgar Whitman had perished in territorial prison half a year ago, still proclaiming his innocence against the accusations made by the Hawthorns and their supporters. "My brother wasn't a criminal," James continued, emotion making his voice unsteady. "He was a legitimate businessman defending his interests against unfair competition. Your group destroyed him with fabrications and political influence." Ezra remained alert, prepared to intervene if the situation turned violent. But Isabel maintained her composure and responded thoughtfully. "Mr. Whitman, you have my sincere condolences. Losing family is deeply painful." Her voice carried authentic compassion. "But your brother's imprisonment wasn't for being competitive. He was found guilty of arson and theft, convicted by judges aligned with your political supporters, sentenced by a jury of his peers based on concrete evidence and eyewitness accounts." Isabel's tone stayed composed, yet resolute. "The coal oil container discovered in our burned store the stolen goods he attempted to resell the witnesses who observed him departing our property that fateful night. You framed him, you, your husband, and that corrupt sheriff." The allegation lingered heavily in the room. Ezra noticed uncertainty crossing some audience members' faces, particularly those unfamiliar with the complete narrative who might question whether the Hawthorns were truly the victims they claimed to be. "Mr. Whitman," Isabel spoke softly, "would you care to understand what truly led to your brother's downfall?" "I already know what caused it. You get special treatment because he's disabled and you're both cowards." The familiar barbs should have wounded Ezra, but instead they seemed to glance off him like raindrops on a tin roof. Too much had transpired. Too many truths had come to light for such words to carry any weight anymore. "What brought about your brother's ruin," Isabel continued, "was his unwillingness to compete fairly. When our trading posts began to thrive, he faced 2 options: enhance his own enterprise or attempt to demolish ours. He chose destruction." She motioned toward the gathered crowd. "Every individual in this chamber faces competition. Some rise to the challenge by increasing their efforts, delivering superior service, discovering innovative ways to better serve their clientele. Others resort to undermining their rivals. That's convenient rhetoric when you enjoy political backing." "Mr. Whitman," a commanding voice interjected from the auditorium's edge. Governor Harrison rose, his presence instantly drawing all eyes. "Mrs. Hawthorne lacked political protection when your brother set fire to her establishment. She possessed something far more valuable, the backing of a community that recognized her worth." The governor strode toward the podium, his words carrying official gravitas. "I've examined every document pertaining to your brother's case. The evidence was irrefutable, but moreover, I've conducted personal visits to the Hawthorne trading post and witnessed their achievements. He addressed the entire assembly. Within 3 years, their enterprise has become the territory's most prosperous trading establishment. Not through preferential treatment, but by offering equitable prices, superior merchandise, and dependable service. They've generated employment for 12 individuals, provided sanctuary for travelers in distress, and contributed more tax revenue than businesses double their size. Yet they remain nothing but a coward and a cripple. James Whitman's tone grew increasingly desperate. How can they outperform legitimate merchants? Because, another voice emerged from the crowd, they grasp something your brother never could. Captain Morrison stood his weathered countenance grave. I've transported freight through this territory for 2 decades. I've interacted with countless businesses. The Hawthorns prosper because they prioritize their customers over their competitors. Indeed, Tom Henderson affirmed, rising. When my family sought supplies on credit, they extended trust without questioning our ability to repay. They supported us through difficult times. More voices joined the chorus, aided customers, supported neighbors, competitors, who'd learned to enhance their own operations rather than sabotage others. This is what your brother failed to comprehend, Isabel addressed James Whitman gently. Success isn't achieved by destroying others. It's about fostering value and nurturing a supportive community. James Whitman surveyed the crowd, witnessing countless faces, sharing testimonials of how the Hawthorns had positively transformed their lives and enterprises. His resolve weakened as realization dawned. He wasn't merely opposing 2 individuals, but an entire united community. They're still just beneficiaries of sympathy, he muttered feebly. Are they truly? Governor Harrison challenged. From my perspective, they embody precisely what this territory requires. Individuals who transform adversity into advancement, who construct connections rather than barriers, who demonstrate that true merit stems from character, not circumstance. James Whitman remained motionless, deep in contemplation, before slowly making his way to the exit. At the threshold, he paused and turned. I sincerely hope your assessment proves correct, he whispered. I hope they truly embody what you believe them to be. Following his departure, the auditorium gradually reclaimed its celebratory atmosphere. The Hawthorne Fair Commerce Act received unanimous approval, establishing safeguards for ethical businesses throughout the territory. As the gathering dispersed and officials extended their congratulations on the victory, Ezra and Isabel found themselves alone on the Capitol building's steps, observing the sunset paint, the vibrant Denver skyline. Do you ever contemplate it? Isabel mused. How different things might have been if Buck Morrison hadn't brought us together. Occasionally, Ezra acknowledged, though not with any remorse. No, because somehow I believe our paths would have crossed eventually. Perhaps differently, perhaps at another time, but inevitably. Isabel's face brightened with a smile. You truly believe that? I believe certain souls are destined to be partners, meant to create something extraordinary that neither could achieve independently. He gently clasped her hand. I believe our experiences, both pleasant and challenging, were simply fate's way of ensuring we didn't miss our destined connection. As they sat together, watching the city lights emerge like stars below, Ezra reflected on their remarkable journey. From a malicious prank intended to shame 2 broken spirits, they had built a thriving enterprise, a strong marriage, and a community that had revolutionized the territory's approach to commerce and competition. What lies ahead? Isabel wondered. Whatever we decide, Ezra responded. Together, the solitary cowboy and the rejected woman had evolved into something neither could have envisioned during their first encounter in that modest cabin. They had become living proof that true worth isn't determined by society's judgments, but by the courage to believe in oneself and the wisdom to recognize those who see your authentic value. They had become the territory's pride, not for achieving perfection, but for demonstrating that beauty often emerges from life's deepest scars. As a distant train's whistle resonated across the vast prairie landscape, It carried whispers of tomorrow's adventures, fresh challenges, and newfound opportunities, all waiting to prove that when love and partnership unite, no obstacle could stand insurmountable in their shared journey.